splurging. Not me. That's not me. Don't get that wrong. He's David Perdue. I have to be very honest about his feeling. This is how he feels, not me. But I just really have to actually demonstrate his desire. He is wanting, not mine. I can feel that he wants to say this. Let me actually mention this once more because this is a very important issue. David Perdue, I want to say that John Ossoff is really the person against this type of expansion of a governmental relief program because he resists this expansion of the PPE from the very beginning. And the PPP, the small business loans that could have eventually sustained the local economy, he never actually signed up from the very beginning. He rejected it. He never wants to actually endorse or champion any type of stimulus packages that might eventually sustain our local economy. And he actually blames the reckless spending in the form of tax cuts. John Ossoff is really a coward. He would never actually identify the tax cuts in a proper sense. But if I ever actually rectify the moderator's definition of the tax cuts, technically the greatest beneficiary, the President Donald Trump's tax cuts, were the lower middle class, or even the poorest of the poor. These people somehow experienced the elevation of the tax burden. They were actually graced from any type of obligations that might eventually ruin their economy because every penny matters to them, but they were somehow exempted from tax obligation. Then this type of a compulsory exemption would be so fascinating, so then they no longer need to be bound by the taxational duty. That's great. That's really the reason throughout his presidency, more than 6 million people experienced a graduation from poverty. They no longer need to suffer from extreme poverty that would have trapped them into the vicious cycle. Well, that's what they said. But in comparison with Donald Trump, President Obama, throughout his 8 years, he actually created more population who eventually got demoted to status of poverty. They actually got lower ranked because of the economic difficulty. Once upon a time, middle class, they somehow found themselves belonging to the poorest in our nation. 800,000 people were newly facing poverty during his presidency. Indeed, even after more of an expansion of social entitlements, President Obama failed to tackle the problem of poverty properly. He only increased more of a debt. All he did was increasing or propagating the population of a poverty-stricken, the poverty-stricken. And because of that, there were more money that were spent, so President Obama left behind enormous amount of debt. However, President Donald Trump could have not been that much free from debts also. Because of the corona pandemic crisis, he had to approve the massive spending that might actually seem somewhat irresponsible, but because of this unprecedented economic crisis coming from the corona pandemic, he had to sign up for this massive spending. That was really the reason why the state of Georgia was granted to have 47 billion, and amongst all, 7 billion was truly used to support the local network of hospitals. So more free and reachable, accessible medical service and care would be supportable with this type of a stimulus bill that was sponsored by President Donald Trump. That's his belief, not me. But John Ossoff, he was really against the PPP or small business loan help or any type of financial aids that would immediately turn the economic misfortune around. He actually opted out of it. He rejected it from the very beginning. He had done it, and he's going to do it again because he already, from the very beginning, was against this notion. So now let's try not to actually put enormous hope in him. Think about it. He was against it, so he's going to do it again because he never actually accept this because he's been too afraid of increasing debts undertaken by this nation. However, this is really the time to have a stimulus package which could immediately help people. That's what he said. He never denies that President Donald Trump increased the debt burden of this country.
No, actually, let's talk about the national debt, Senator. You ran your entire first campaign on bringing down the national debt, even before COVID. After 6 years in the Senate majority, our national debt increased by $5 trillion on your watch. On your watch. Those were your policies, sir. And talking about bringing resources home to Georgia for our hospitals, 9 rural hospitals have closed in this state in the last 10 years. And Senator Perdue continues to oppose accepting Medicaid expansion. Georgians are already paying their federal taxes into the Medicaid program. You're letting that money go to other states instead of sustaining our rural hospitals. David Perdue does not care about our health. He only cares about his donors. That is your time, Senator Perdue.
Well, thank
So this is really interesting. So let's try to actually talk about the debt. John Ossoff, tackles very irresponsible understanding of David Perdue. Before the coronavirus, he was actually present in the Senate. When he was actually, more than 6 years a part of the Senate majority by being a member of the Republican Party, under his presence, under his watch, in his presence, the national debt has been soared up to $5 trillion. The actual national debt, the level of national debt has elevated to $5 trillion. There is a significant surge. Within the 6 years, it just actually reached the threshold of $5 trillion. It just actually reached the high bar of $5 trillion within the 60 years. Can you believe it? But this has already occurred when President Donald Trump was in power, but well before that. More than 6 years, when he was serving the U.S. Senate throughout the past 60 years, he was a solidly member of the Senate majority because his party was always maintaining majority when he was in the Senate for the past 6 years, right? Not just 40 years, but in 6 years, the GOP has maintained its majority, right? So David Perdue was a part of the majority, and he was always flaunting of his record as a deficit hawk who's been so vigilant about keeping a close eye on the national debt surging. He really wants to crack down on the burgeoning of a national debt. I mean, let me actually say this one. It might sound really bizarre because, I'd like to drink something. David Perdue was very desperate. He would like to be portrayed as a deficit hawk who's been very much cautious about spending by keeping an eagle eye on every purse string. That means he would tighten up the belt. He would actually be mindful of the pull strings by being a guardian of spending, guardian of the trove, guardian of the national coffer. He would actually never participate in this reckless spending endorsed by Democrats. That was, his identity he would have liked to believe. However, throughout 60 years, when he was a part of the majority, Senate majority, he had done nothing. When the national debt eventually has soared to reach the level of $5 trillion on his watch, that means in his presence. When he was a president in the Senate, he has been, starting from 6 years, part of the Senate majority. So he can claim a greater power and influence if he wants to do. But with this type of privilege, he had done nothing. When the national debt has almost skyrocketed. And he has done almost nothing. He really actually talks about the actual grant given to the state of Georgia, the $47 billion, and amongst them, $7 billion was indeed allocated to local hospital. But under his watch, on his watch, more than 9 rural hospitals are being closed in recent 10 years. That means within the 10 years, 9 hospitals in the outskirts of the Georgia, they were closed or shut down. Can you believe it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Senator Perdue only cares about his sponsors who would be deeply involved with health insurance program or who operates main medical centers who would like to make more money, even playing politics with human health. And he would be so against the expansion of the Medicaid. And he really refused to bring more of opportunities for Georgians by operating more business centers. Even the rest of constituents living in Georgia already pay the similar type of amount of money. There is no discount for people of Georgia when they have little access to medical service. They equally pay the significant amount of money from their taxes. So they actually would be burdened with a similar amount of tax burden. Then they actually need to redeem their tax money to enjoy the greater Medicare services. But the problem is, as Senator Perdue refused to join this Medicaid expansion, the state of Georgia only experienced a significant setback. The people living in Georgia would be disadvantaged whenever they like to resort to the medical services in search of proper care or assistance. They could never obtain that. That's not possible. Why? Because Senator Perdue would never actually do anything when 9 rural hospitals went out of business within 10 years. He would be so heavily funded by the gigantic mega corporates in the healthcare industry who would favor some of the corporate hospitals. He would never let the local community hospitals would thrive in the community. In that way, the Medicaid or taxpayer monies would have likely to be involved to sustain them. But he noticed that in that way, his sponsors, health insurance companies would be disadvantaged. Do you understand this? If there would be the expansion of the Medicaid, then the regular hospitals would experience significant losses. The more people would redeem their Medicaid, or the more people rely on public healthcare services, then the profitability of regular hospitals would likely to go down. Yeah, that's the real reason. In that way, Senator Perdue would recognize entrepreneurial risks undertaken by his cronies and chums in the healthcare industry, the corporate hospitals, whose business is more of a for-profit money-making, or health insurance companies. He really liked to defend because they are major donors in campaign finance. He knew it all too well. That's the real reason he said a no to expansion of Medicaid. Let's try to actually handcuff Georgians, chances of redeeming Medicaid services. You know what? If I ever actually go to hospital, say I'd like to use a Medicaid, that means 1/20 percentile of my services would be paid off by the government because there is a co-op system, like this co-payment and co-op system undertaken. So the burden would be divided between the insured and the U.S. government. Then the U.S. government would like to definitely drive down the cost with no bubble. That's a problem. Then hospitals say, oh, excuse me, we don't really actually, prefer any type of patients who would never actually pay the money to us, who would actually, use a Medicaid service, because that would actually lower down our profitability, because the government never wants us to literally claim greater margins. They always want to diminish the margins or returns we might actually claim. We don't like that. We would some very greedy hospitals say that we do not actually accept the Medicaid card. They can actually write that down. That's true. But that's the reason why David Perdue is really against expansion of Medicaid. If there would be much more aggressive provision of a Medicaid, that means most of gigantic mega hospitals would never be able to operate business in a lucrative way. They can never actually be a free market corporate entity whose business mindset revolves around making more money out of people's health. That's not possible. The problem is people living in Georgia, that does not mean they would spend less. There is no discrimination. Even if you never actually redeem Medicaid because of the limitation in your state, that does not mean you would actually experience a lower the burden in your taxes or in your medical fees or coverages. They all actually pay the similar amount of money than people living in Georgia because of your senator's ties and connections with the high profile power players in the healthcare industry. Your rights are being shrunk. You're not actually be able to redeem all the entitlements you deserve. Do you know that? Your merits are getting smaller. Even though you pay all the things you need to pay, you cannot actually claim in return. Why? Because your senator doesn't really like to do so. Because he always works for his sponsor, heavily invested in the healthcare industry. His deep-pocketed donors would like to see the minimization of the Medicare expansion because they just really think that Medicaid would never allow them to make money or exploit every cent from their patients, because the government would not let that happen. If they ever want to redeem their Medicaid service, that means there would be lower the return given to them. Their margins are going to be narrowed. They cannot actually make money in a way they like to operate corporate business. That's the problem. That's really the reason why they want to suppress the redemption of Medicaid instead of expanding that. That's really the reason why David Perdue had done nothing. The 9 rural hospitals, especially serving the Black African American community, they were all went out of business. They were all gone out of business. They went out of business. They were all closed in recent 10 years. But even actually before the pandemic crisis, when David Perdue was a part of the ruling party, for the last 4 years he was a part of the ruling party, and for the last 6 years he was a member of the Senate majority, because the Republican Party, not just actually the majority in the Senate for the past 6 years, but starting from the last 4 years, his party was the ruling party, having a president from the same party, right? Ever since Donald Trump. Under his watch, this entire nation experienced a significant surge in the national debts. The national debt has soared and skyrocketed to $5 trillion. This is the reality. He always actually brag about his conscience as a deficit hawk who has been so scrupled in terms of allocating proper amount of taxpayers' money as a responsible guardian of Treasury. But this is what happened. This was even actually before COVID-19. You know what? If you ever actually vote for David Perdue, you would actually decide to minimize your Medicaid service, because he would never fight for increasing the chances of providing more service to Americans living in Georgia. Even though they were equally paying Medicaid or tax burdens, the rest of people across the nation, but you know what, Georgian, the poverty-stricken, or somewhat less fortunate Georgians can never redeem their chances of being helped by Medicaid in time of necessity, because their senator never wants to have any hospitals that might accept Medicaid, that might actually redeem, or that might actually provide equal service for Medicaid subscribers, because he wants these type of pro bono or reliable charitable hospitals go out of business, because he never wants to see them. He never wants to have them operate their business to provide a cheap medical service and affordable medical care, because he wants his cronies make more money by declining or rejecting any type of redemption of Medicaid services. This is true. I really understand everything. 나 역시 다시 녹음 안 하면 되네. 그것 때문이에요, 진짜요. 진짜.
Thank you again. In talking about the debt, let's get the facts right. It's about $3 trillion, and that's the momentum that was carried after the last administration. We got the economy going. We actually lowered the debt curve by about $2 trillion over the next decade. They never talk about that. That's a fact, not opinion. Under COVID, we made a tough decision that whatever was necessary to get people to help. The Democrats voted with us on part of it, but right now, to get the rest of it, they're playing partisan politics, and that's what's choking the life out of our economy right now. That and the Democrat-run states blocking the economy. This is what I'm talking about. He will say and do anything to hide this radical socialist agenda. The number one thing that will bankrupt us is the Green New Deal and socialized medicine, which he supports.
Mr. Ronsau, 45 seconds.
He first acknowledges how much the national debt handed down from the Obama administration. Throughout Obama's 8-year national debt already actually got increased to $3 trillion. But you know what? The actual track record was already on the curve to lower down the national debt to the point of $2 trillion in the next decade. That was really the plan before this coronavirus. Because everything was arranged, and the President Donald Trump was diligently working to at least minimize the burden on the future generation, because he was already granted to have this $3 trillion debt economy from President Obama. He was already experiencing a $3 trillion debt economy. That was really the case. However, President Donald Trump was very responsible in terms of federal spending, so he was moving this economy forward by placing it on the track of $2 trillion. This is what it is about. The every little detail was planned to put this entire national debt on the track of $2 trillion in the next decade by gradually cutting off unnecessary spending or cutting corners that might actually remove any frills. That was the vision about to take place before this COVID-19. However, this type of unprecedented disaster took place, which changed the viewpoints of President Donald Trump, because he believed that there should be immediate help and support on behalf of Americans. That was really the reason he had to do away with the fundamental tenet he was believing. And he was a very great advocate of cutting off spendings. He really always prefers no frills and the governmental spending by fighting for greater efficacy and healthy debt and loan ratio, debt and revenue ratio, right? But right now, Democrats are more like darkening the people's doorstep with their such a suppressive lockdown and their party politics. Even Nancy Pelosi had been part of undoing this stimulus bill by bringing additional political factors. Right now, Democrats are really the problem. Because President Donald Trump and Republicans are very desperate to gather their thoughts to pass the bill, but Democrats always want more by demanding the exact lines they wanted to see. And this type of unilateral voice eventually foiled the proper passage of the spending bills that might increase the people's consumer power. Because right now people have no disposable cash, they experience immediate cash strain. We just really like to inject money into the local areas. However, Democrats play politics at the last minute. They always drive a wedge issue to dismantle this unity, rallying behind the common agenda, helping American families. That's really the reason this stimulus bill would always cut in the deadlock. Right now, they're actually choking the American economy. Half of the bill that would never be actually passed because of the Democrats threatening and hostage conditions. This type of standstill condition would be caused by Democrats because they're really getting in the way of it. And with this lockdown conditions, more and more people would experience significant deficits in their personal private banking. They would no longer find any source of income. They can never pay off their debts. This would eventually jack up the national debts because more money should be meted out and allocated to local family or even local businesses. Otherwise, the entire economy would go dismantled. The economic meltdown is just about to come with this type of lockdown restrictions. This is not affordable. This type of a suppression of a proper economic businesses can never be sustainable. Think about it. How long are you going to withhold this proper transaction? Till when we would never see the resumption of everyday business. This is really disastrous. How are you going to pay off ever increasing debts owned by rest of people? These people owe too much debts right now. They can no longer have a capacity to pay this off. They no longer have a cash to burn. Needless to say, they have no cash to purchase commodities and victuals and essentials and staples. This type of a suppressive lockdown would only worsen the national debt condition. Eventually, somebody must pick up the bill at the end of the day. And who would do that? With no economic activities, no productive or constructive transactions, how can one expect to have money? Then eventually, this would have fallen into the lap of Uncle Sam. Then the United States will only increase its own national debts because of the suppression caused by or insisted by Democrats. I mean, that's his viewpoint, not mine.
There's the senator with the catchphrases again. But no substance, little truth, and no sense of personal responsibility. Where is the relief, Senator? The PPP Small Business Lending Program expired in August. Extended unemployment insurance expired in August. Where is the relief? You were on vacation for a month while all that happened. In fact, Senator Perdue was leading the charge to cut unemployment insurance in the middle of a pandemic after millions of Georgians had been forced out of work by a virus that he had told us would have little impact on economic growth. Where is the relief, Senator? Can you do anything but blame the Democrats?
I absolutely can. Can I give a response?
This is interesting. Senator Perdue again relies on the catcher for rage. He just actually chanted his mantra without having substance. He's always having an easy catchy tune. Just simply wants to disguise his contentless, substanceless philosophy. That's what it is about. If you ever actually look deeper into what Senator Perdue has done so far, the actual PPP, the Small Business Loan Program, expired in August. And ever since that, there was no additional relief to lift up a burden from the small-sized entrepreneurs or restaurateurs. No. And the extended unemployment insurance, that also got terminated in August. These programs, starting from the midsummer, there was no renewal for both of these programs. When millions of people renewed their claims to be unemployed, they were actually going out of business. They were actually lining up in front of the unemployment center to claim jobless claims. That's all they need to do because they can't actually help but do that. Instead of blaming Democrats, can you actually provide us more substantiated plans that could help us to break through this economic crisis? That's really the thingy. Because you know what, in the midst of all different crises, he actually took 1 month of vacation. Who would know what happened? He actually literally emptied his zit to enjoy his holiday because he was shielded and insulated from economic crisis. That's what happened. Think about it. He never actually wanted to sign up for a bill that might actually give a greater chances to jobless Georgians to claim unemployment insurance. He literally refuses to recognize the seriousness because he voted for for the rejection of unemployment benefits expansion. He never actually says that this would be proper, so he actually voted it down. He said a no. This is not the end of the story. He even actually redeemed his vacation for 1 month by emptying out his seat, while most of his people were struggling to meet the ends at the end of the month. They couldn't actually afford anything. They were been actually too preoccupied with the bread and butter issue. They could barely think of other than bringing home bacon. But Senator Perdue, whose rich milieu would completely provide a snuggy protection, he couldn't actually care less about the ordeal of every average Georgians. That's really the reason he hadn't done anything. Let me actually repeat this. The PPP, the Small Business Loan Programs, that actually expired. That completely got out of date starting from August 2020, the midsummer. And the expanded unemployment insurance program, that could have sustained the people without jobs for a while. That also got finished. That got terminated starting from this August 2020. That's it. But he still, again, relies on very much a simple catchphrase without actually having any fact-oriented understanding. His analysis would be so vain. It's like ringing hollow, just like the mantra. There is no substance in it. There is no content in it. He's just actually repeating same word like incantation. It's like, a spell. That's not the end of the story. He actually never wanted to join any type of progressive wing in the Congress to author the bill that might actually expand the unemployment benefits for millions of jobless people in Georgians. He doesn't really think about the adversity and hardship of the people in Georgia, the very people he was supposed to serve. He couldn't care less about them because, when people are struggling ever since the COVID-19, they are evicted out of their buildings because they couldn't afford their rent, or they are actually busted from their job. They got actually fired, they've been sacked, or they've been given a pink slips. They've been actually removed from their job posts. So they actually line up in front of the unemployment office to claim unemployment insurance. But you know what? This would be so limited. There should be immediate expansion to at least absorb more people. This type of a social safety net should be increased in time of a great calamity like the COVID-19 to at least help more people properly. But that was not done because Senator Perdue wanted to say this would be pointless. It would actually do so little to improve our economic condition. In the long-term economic growth, this would be, too ephemeral and meaningless. That's really the reason he would actually, remove it and reject it. That's how his mindset works. Let me actually repeat this one. Senator Perdue rejected any expansion of the unemployment insurance program that might immediately bring immediate cash to Georgian households. Why? Because he said this type of stimulus packages or social welfare programs would have no long-term consequences, and this would do too little to be notified in the long run. This would actually only worsen the economic devastation, and it would only actually have it would have almost no solution for tackling the existing problems or to solving the chronic problems. That's what he said. He said that you wouldn't do too little to solve the problem that might actually downtrodden the entire system for long term. He actually was more likely to be motivated to cut unemployment insurance. He really likes to, his philosophy is very clear. He's been really against the expansion of the unemployment benefits that could be claimed by the jobless workers or temporary workers. Think about it. In these days, because of the business occupation limitations, there would be only 20 to 30 percentile chances that you would see the regular operation of a business by any stores or any job places. That means even if you're a worker, you're fully employed, but your chance of working 9 to 5 would be not regular anymore. Because there would be no job provider which guarantees the perfect redemption of business hours. Even if you're on the payroll, you would have a significant contraction in your payment. You can never actually claim the full-time employment, even if you're fully employed, because there is no work. The entire city has turned itself into a ghost town because there is no transaction and there is a serious corona lockdown. Then there should be immediate financial aid in the name of unemployment insurance or jobless claims, or these are really the fundamentals that would eventually help people who are desperate, who are lost in despair, right? But Senator Perdue said this would do too little to improve the economic condition. This would be evanescent, like morning dew. It would disappear with no trace at all. For that reason, it's useless. It would actually do nothing. So let's try to forget about this. Let's try to think about something more constructive. He completely downplayed the importance of having a quick injection into the domestic economy in Georgia because he thought that this would be too little. This would be too insignificant. This would only bear almost a traceless minimum results. But there are so many people who are right now without jobs. They just really can't actually think of a better way to obtain a proper cash. Because this is a lifeline to so many people who are fighting for their life. Not because of the corona pandemic crisis, but because of the economic desperation. But again, he actually was against the expansion of any type of job claims. And he actually enjoyed his month-long vacation, while most of the people during the summer experienced immediate pinch and the cash strain and cash-tight circumstances because there was no proper supply and a provision of a cash coming from either unemployed insurance or PPP, the Small Business Owner Support Loans. These type of economic aids were no longer available because of its outdated obsolescence. That's really the reason there should be a Congress who's been working and which has been working vigorously to renew them. That was what was supposed to be done, but he hadn't done any of this. When these fundamental programs had faced its termination, the Congress should have been working really hard, even breaking their back to renew this, past anything substantial to open up this lifeline, oxygen. This provision of oxygen was cut off because this entirely paralyzed economy was connected to life support machine and certain provision of supplies was cut off. But the Congress enjoyed its recess, and Senator Perdue was no exception. He actually went on a month-long vacation. But remember this, by the midsummer, especially in August, unemployment insurance was finished. It was no longer valid, and the PPP small business loans extending the credit to endangered small-sized businesses, that was also terminated. That was also demoted and outdated by August. Yeah. Those two fundamental events took place in August. But he still enjoyed his vacation that lasts almost about a month. But he still relies on this type of silly partisan catch-up for races to divide the nation. And he just really wants to minimize any type of benefits quickly claimed and redeemed by Georgians, because he believes this would do almost nothing and this money would be a waste. That's his belief. He believes that the economic desperation and depravity daunting majority of households in Georgia would be nothing. So they would deserve so less.
Well, let's talk about the relief, John. By bringing the relief to Georgia, we saved 1.5 million jobs, something you wouldn't know about. You've never created a real job in America. You don't know what's involved in creating a job and keeping it. We put money in the hands of the smallest businesses out here in America. The average loan size in Georgia is about $100,000. The average employment per recipient is about 10. I'm telling you, this was a life-saving exercise, and what's being held up right now is being held up by the Democrats. We are totally ready to put this bill on the floor and fund another couple $100 billion to get this done. They're holding it up because they want state relief for California and New York. They want bailout relief for their irresponsible retirement liabilities that they built.
That is your time, Senator Perdue. Let's move on to our next question.
So, David Perdue actually said that John Ossoff never really understood the very gravity associated with the job creation. He's been actually rigorously working on the expansion of the more small business loans that might actually stimulate this, job providers. The actual possible scope for loans allowed to small business would be around 100,000, and this would actually create at least several more job posts. So the total amount of estimated recipients of this type of program would be 10. And Democrats are right now getting in the way by having another standstill circumstances. This type of standoff is normally caused by the stubbornness of Democratic Party, who would never really likes to deliver this type of immediate reaction to state of Georgia, because they would like to bail out irresponsible corporate entities in California, in New York. This type of gigantic democratic states, they would always like to pack up more of a stipulated clauses that would favor their corrupted business corporate entities instead of rescuing the small businesses. Their greed and obdurance would be number one reason why there is no immediate continuation of the PPP that would eventually secure 100,000 loans for many of the small businesses, which are the pillars and the backbone of the local economy, providing more of jobs to average people. The average income earners are likely to secure their job posts or occupational opportunities from these type of small businesses. That's really the reason why Republicans work really hard to continue and persist the beauty of the PPP. That would at least secure 100,000 in the form of the small business aid loans. And the minimum amount of people that would actually receive this type of benefits in total calculation, if you ever actually think about how many people would be hired, how many people would actually receive benefits indirectly, that would be approximately around 10. The 10 people would be potential recipients by holding a job post from the small-sized businesses. As long as they receive this type of loans, they could continue their operation, they could keep their business going, they would never actually go out of business, then that would eventually guarantee their job posts, because there would be certain conditions attached to this type of loans. They would not easily remove people by firing them because they received this government-backed loans that might actually, provide a sufficient ground for them to provide jobs, right? This would be somewhat conditioned. Providing the fact that they would provide a job post for local residents in the state of Georgia, this type of government-backed cheap interest loan would be available to small-sized business, right? This would be around 100,000, and the estimated recipients indirectly from this type of business loans would be 10. And that way we can actually sustain local economy. And that way we can actually let more of a mom and pop businesses continue their hard working without actually going out of business, without actually filing for bankruptcy. However, this type of greed coming from the corporate entities from New York and California, they just really wants to have a bailout for, mega companies where they just really like to flaunt up their business highlights. Even actually, throttling the money supply that could have been given to small businesses in Georgia. This type of inequality existing in the level that actually created such a chaos and delusion. Those more and more of PPP type of similar programs are being blocked and even actually caught in limbo. They no longer make one single progress because they come to steel stain. These type of major projects that truly come to steel stain, why they were actually being taken hostage, as if they actually cut in a gridlock standoff. This is another culture of the deadlock. Why they would actually cut in this traffic jam? Because the Democrats refused to back off from their greedy pet project, pork barrel project. That would have bailed out such a lucrative business. That would be the major mojo of high-ranking and high-profile Democrats in the leadership. They would never really want to see the states like New York and California when a witness significant abatement in subsidies that might actually prefer their cash cow, like Wall Street or Silicon Valley,